All right, I'm joined today by Jenna, a trans activist, and I'm really excited to be having this conversation. For a long time here on the channel, I've made the point, and I've said to my listeners, if you want to learn about trans people, talk to a trans person. Don't listen to Joe Rogan or some bro podcaster or some Republican politician or your minister tell you what they're about. Listen to them. So I wanted to bring on Jenna today, and that's what we're going to talk about. How's things going?
Well, first off, thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. Like you said, it's really hard for us in media to get access. A lot of times, CNN, Fox News, whatever, they don't bring many trans people on. It's a lot of cis people talking about our issues. And I always tell people, especially when you're talking to a bigot, it's pretty outrageous because for them, it's like a transphobic circle jerk. It's like they only ever talk to themselves about whatever nonsense they heard from Joe Rogan or Matt Walsh or anything from the Daily Wire, yada, yada, yada. So it really means a lot that you brought me on to let me speak.
I appreciate it. And like I was telling you before the show, I'm still learning about this. It's still relatively new to me. And so I said to you right out of the gate that if I was to say anyone to know, because I want to learn, and I really want this to be not only a learning experience for me, but for my audience as well. So I just want the audience to know that you've got the floor, and at any point, if you need to say that's not how you refer to that, or that's not how you say that, I'm perfectly down with that, and I'm cool with it.
And I also really appreciate that, because sometimes cis people can get weird even when I'm just really politely correcting them, right? And so I love that you understand that you have to let us properly correct you, because we're not trying to start anything. We're just trying to, get people to understand how to properly respect us like anybody else. If I got somebody's name wrong and they said, "Oh, this," I'd be like, "Wow, I'm so embarrassed." Right? And so it's just basic respect. So
exactly.
So
one thing I'm curious of,
breathing down your neck or anything like that.
I appreciate that. And one thing I'm curious of is, what would you consider to be some of the biggest misconceptions that people may have about the trans community?
Oh my God. Well, we have between, the internet, YouTube, Fox News, and the Republican Party, there is so much misinformation about us. Even when I'm talking to someone who's not necessarily a bigot, they'll be like, "Oh, but what about, trans women in women's sports?" And they'll say terms like biological male. Well, we're not biological anything. It's just our chromosomes happen to be a certain letter, right? When you're born, your parents and the doctor, they see your genitals and they'll just make that assumption. And most of the time, most people don't have a problem with it. But we know who we are all the way down to age 5. I was like age 5 when I knew. I would sit in my bed at night and I would pray to God and basically beg him to turn me into a girl. Of course, it didn't happen. But and I didn't know that I was trans. This was 1991. And so I just knew that I wasn't a boy. But I also grew up homeschooled by Christian fundamentalists. And so
wow.
Yeah. it was pretty rough. And so I instinctively knew I couldn't tell my parents. But that's one of the biggest things they use is children. They think in their, in their their whatever you call it, their prearranged notion about trans people, they think that kids couldn't possibly know. And so they think that everybody thinks that, and they think that that's a factual thing. And it's not true. Another thing too, that especially bigots, they just assume that trans people are inherently sexual, that we're inherently like predators, especially of course on Twitter. I mean, I can't tell you how many people go "Oh, they call me groomer, they call me a pedophile," all this stuff. And I'm just like, how do you know anything about me? You don't know anything about me. You just know that I'm trans. And so therefore I'm a threat. There's just a whole ecosystem of misinformation that is just accepted as fact. And so that's why, again, I just really appreciate the fact that you brought me on to kind of just dispel a lot of these myths. It's pretty exhausting.
I
constant.
imagine so.
Yeah.
I imagine it would have to be. And there is just so much misinformation out there, and people just speaking confidently, about it as though they're the ones that know. And that's why I've always said, I want to talk to a trans person about this. I want to have a better understanding of it. And as you were saying that, I was thinking back to my childhood. And, I remember when I was in the first grade, my teacher looked like Linda Carter. That played Wonder Woman, and she did. And I just remember like the first time that she ever came over and like knelt down in front of me and was working beside me, and I could smell her perfume. I immediately knew where I stood. It's like
Yeah.
I knew. It was like no one had to tell me. And I've said that to people so many times. I'm like, well, who had to tell you that you were straight? And I don't understand why anyone would think that you had to be told to be a certain way, or that that you were groomed to be that, because I couldn't have been groomed to be anything other than what I am today. I mean, that's just it. So I've never understood the ones that thinks that somehow or another someone made you the way you were. You, like you said, you had it figured out at 5.
Oh yeah. I mean, I started to figure it out. It took me, obviously our culture has a huge problem with toxic masculinity, right? I don't have a problem with masculinity, but it's toxic masculinity, right? Growing up, I grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so when you're raised as a male, I'm sure you know the culture. If you do anything so slightly feminine, you got called gay or you got called whatever. And so it was between that and my fundamentalist Christian upbringing. It took me a long time to kind of break myself down and build myself back up. And, you have to be able to face rejection, a lot of it. And that's another thing too. We were going back to talking about myths. A lot of people like to say, "Oh, this is just a trend. It's like the past 10 years, it's become trendy to become trans." And I tell people, "Is it trendy to become trans? Are you kidding me?" Because my dad pretends I don't exist. I lost a lot of good friends. I'm very lucky in my sense, because most of my family is not only accepting, super accepts me. Even quite a few of my good Christian friends stuck around, but like a lot of us don't. A lot of us have to face our entire family rejecting us,
Yeah.
And
so
yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it goes back to all of these myths that were present even back in the 80s and the 70s about the gay community. The same exact talking points, that gay people were somehow grooming kids. They say that about us now. And, they're going to try and become teachers so they have their access there. And it's just like, no. And then they'll say, they said back then, oh, parents were grooming their kids to be gay, which is absurd. Because if anybody's a teacher, you can't even get the kid to wear deodorant, let alone listen to anything that you're saying. Right?
Yeah.
So no, they have to take away our autonomy and our individual identity, because in that way, it's easier for them to dehumanize us. And when you can dehumanize a group of people, it's easier for ignorant people and bigoted people to treat us as less than human and take away your rights, which is what we're seeing with this administration.
Yeah, we are like never before. And I can't imagine what it would be like to be in your situation, because I've just, I sit back and watch it, and I can see the bigotry plain as day. And I just hear, I'm in the Bible Belt here in East Tennessee. I'm in the buckle of it. And I'm not joking when I say that. I had a friend visit from California, and she made it out here and was riding around these back roads. And she's like, I have never seen this many churches in one place at one time. She said, I thought you were being sarcastic when you said that. And I said, no, I'm not. And no, they're everywhere. And I hate to say this and be this blunt about it, but outside on the signs, their politics are right there, and they're preaching the politics. Yeah. They're preaching the politics in the pulpit. So, people around here, they're brought up from a young age to hear that. And now it's such a hot topic, and it's such a divisive issue. I've not been to church since 2002, by the way. I'm pretty agnostic these days, but
me too.
But the church, the churches I went to are just so deep in the weeds of MAGA that I honestly feel like I'm glad I made it out when I did. I made it out at 22-year-old. I can't imagine what it would have been like to have been brought up in it. Because back in the 80s, I mean, maybe I was ignorant and didn't know maybe I didn't see the bigotry because I was ignorant of it as a kid, maybe. But now they're so deep in the trenches of it that I can't imagine how any kid brought up in that will be able to make it out, because I hope they can. I mean, I really do, because it's just so heavy, and so there's just so much hate spewed from a place that I thought was supposed to be a place of love and acceptance. And that's where I always have been, that's what really got me disillusioned with the church a long time ago, was their politics and the groups they aligned with. I was like, how can they be aligned with such awful people and then have a picture of Jesus hanging in their establishment? It just makes no sense to me.
Well, and I love that you actually transitioned to religious representation in society and in politics, because like I said, I grew up in a Christian fundamentalist culture. And so in the early to mid 90s, my parents were those crazies that protested abortion clinics. I literally grew up in a Christian nationalist incubator. Now, my parents weren't super crazy, but we could only listen to Christian music. We couldn't listen to secular music, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm so used to that. And I grew up with a lot of friends who weren't like in the niche, like extreme Christian group like I was. And so it's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about reaching out to Christians and having them see us as human, to humanize us to them, because the one thing I always tell them, like if they are having trouble with accepting who we are and whatnot, I always tell them, well, who did Jesus hang out with when he was on earth, right? He hung out with the outcast, the tax collectors, and the sex workers. Who was he against? The religious elites, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. Exactly. You know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah.
Who are the outcasts today? Us.
Yeah.
The immigrants that are being flown to El Salvador. Any marginalized group of people that makes white supremacists feel uncomfortable. That is who Jesus was going to fight against and fight for. And who is he fighting against today? Jerry Falwell Jr., Franklin Graham, all of these, Donald Trump, all of these religious Republican elites, and really anybody that pretends to be like religious but is really just bigoted and closed-minded. Like, because he said that those people were whitewashed tombs. They were a den of vipers because they were fake. They wanted to pretend that they were Christian, but really all they cared about was money and power. And so that's the angle that I come through is I'm a working class person. You're a working class person. Why are we against each other?
Exactly. And I've always pointed out to people too, the only act of violence that Jesus ever did that's recorded in the Bible is when he went into the temple. It was when he went in and threw out the money changers and said, "You've turned my father's house into a den of thieves." And I point that out to some people at times, and they don't really appreciate it. but it's right there. But it's right there. But how old were you when you finally began to speak out to people, your family, your friends? Did you come out to a friend first, or how did you go about that?
So I started by breaking down my what I really believed about religion, and that was around the same age as you. George Carlin was a huge catalyst of mine. I had always questioned my faith, but like my gender identity, I didn't tell my parents because I just knew that we weren't going to get anywhere with that. So around 20, as I left Christianity, became agnostic. Still am. And after that, I started focusing on my gender identity. And I started telling people, just complete strangers online. Looking back, I realized those people knew nothing about me. I was a clean slate for them, so I could tell them my feelings. And then eventually, I just kept getting closer and closer and closer to people close to me. And it was July 4th, 2015. It's going to be 10 years this year. I finally found the courage to come out and speak my truth about who I really am. And I wrote like this big ass long manifesto on Facebook and Instagram. And I told people, because I knew a lot of people, and I just said, you may not know this about me, but I always struggled with this. And now I am, going to start embracing these feelings, figure out where I'm going. So, it was really hard. Obviously, the closer I got to people because you just don't know how they're going to react. And you have to be able to accept the fact that people are not going to want to be around you anymore.
Yeah. Well, I could never fully relate to that, but the closest I could come to that was when I finally came out and said out loud I was agnostic.
Mm-hmm.
And actually for a while I would just go ahead and say the phrase atheist for a while. But I was actually surprised. I had a couple of family members that really embraced me, and I was stunned by one uncle in particular, like really kind of came to my side on that one and was like, if you don't want to believe, don't make him. It's okay. So was there anybody in your life that you thought would really be against it that actually ended up being better, or was you met by some reactions you didn't expect from people?
Oh, that's like every queer person, whether you're gay, lesbian, trans, whatever. It is fascinating to see like those you thought that would support you that actually didn't, and those that you thought wouldn't actually did. I mean, for the most part, the people that I thought would support me did, but there were some, that were just said, no, I can't handle this. And like when I came out to my friends and my family, I told them, look, I know that you knew me as this person for 28 years, give or take, right? However long you knew me. I wanted to make sure that they were going to be comfortable in being able to make this transition with me. Like, yeah, it's harder for me, but the one thing I always tell trans people, I'm like, if you have the strength to do it, you got to remember that these people in your life are transitioning with you. And they knew you as one way for a very long time, and they're going to have to be able to, in their head, switch the name, switch the gender, right? And I know people that also transitioned, and so it took me a minute to adjust. And so I wanted to make sure that everybody in my life had the space to be able to transition with me. I told them, like, you're going to make a mistake. You're going to dead name me. You're going to misgender me. It's okay. As long as I see you make an effort, like, you apologize, correct yourself, move on. Not a big deal. Right. And some I had to be very, very patient with because they were like, I had one friend in particular. He was a great friend. And we had a really great relationship. And he texted me the day that I came out. And he was like, hey, you know that I love you, but this is going to take me some time to get used to. And I said, totally fine. Completely understand. And he was like, I said, as long as I see you making an effort, that's all that really matters. And he said, I don't know if I could call you Jenna, though, just yet. And I got a little bit upset, but you know what? I said, this is where also is on me to practice what I preach. And so I said, okay, the only thing I ever tell about people about my dead name is it starts with a J as well. And so I had a nickname JD growing up. And I told him, I said, hey, I'm still JD. How about that? Do you want to call me that for now? And he said, you know what? Yeah, that actually works. And for a couple of years, he called me JD, never dead named me, which was great. And then one day he's, I'm in the Bay Area. I live in Fremont, and we're both Oakland. Well, not Oakland anymore, but we're both A's fans. And he said, hey, I got tickets. Do you want to go to the A's game? I said, hell yeah. And we were on our way to the A's game, and he said, hey, I just want to let you know now, I get it. And this was one of my friends I grew up with in church and whatnot. And he said, and I said, it took me a minute. I said, oh, wow. And I said, okay, cool. I said, just out of curiosity, what made you get it? And he said, watching you these past 3 years, you're so much more comfortable with who you are. You're so much more genuinely happy. And it got to the point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. And I started crying a little bit. And I said, oh, my God, So I know for a fact that it works. It's really hard to do, but if we can take the time, both sides, to really meet each other where people are at, I really do believe that there are far more people that are good than there are bad. And a lot of times you just got to give them the space to talk and deal with it.
Yeah. I think that's great that you realized that they were transitioning with you too, and I've never heard it put quite that way. That was really cool. I mean, because it would be a big change for them as well to get used to. But you're the one that's going through it, and so it's really good that you had that foresight. And as you were sitting there saying it, I was thinking about all the conversations that I've had with people who you wouldn't believe even people who are like-minded that I consider friends have warned me when I start talking about trans issues. They're like, be careful talking about that. They'll come after you. They'll try to get your channel shut down if you say the wrong word. And I've always just been in the back of my mind going, no, I'm going to put it out there. I'm a white Southern dude from Tennessee, grew up in the 80s. I may make mistakes, may have said things in the past or sang certain songs I wouldn't sing anymore. But it's a learning process, and we're learning together. And so that's what I want people to understand, that it's okay to transition right along with you.
Exactly. And you hit the nail on the head. But one thing I always tell cis people too, because I get cis people to say that to me too. Like, oh, I'm scared if I'm going to get canceled or whatever. And I'm just like, you're not going to get canceled. First off, we barely make up 1% of the population. We literally have the Republican Party trying to erase our rights. What power do we have? Second off, us as trans people, when you literally have every aspect of society trying to work against you, right? Many of my trans friends, like I said, I'm lucky. A lot of them, their entire family rejected them. Their doctors refuse to give them medication. They can't get a job because they're transphobic. Like, it's not an excuse, obviously, but if a trans person is going to be like mean to you, maybe you should take a step back and realize I have all this privilege. And maybe that person is reacting because every cis person they come across treats them like shit. Right? Like, I always tell people, like, try to have a little empathy with marginalized groups of people. Not saying that it's right, not saying that you should be disrespected, but if you say, hey, look, I'm sorry, they might not have ever heard a cis person tell them that. And that may sound ridiculous to people, but it's true. Yeah. So sometimes you just got to be able to have empathy and put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And with our group, especially, it's what we need right now, is people to be empathetic and to see us as human. Because so many people not only don't want to see us as human, they make lots of money between algorithms and YouTube and Spotify and all these different platforms where that's the main base, is cis people just talking to each other and just saying whatever nonsense, and they don't ever want to actually talk to a trans person. They don't ever want to get to know us. Yeah. And then they see this through this incredibly bigoted frame.
Yeah. And that's why I've said so many times here on my channel, we need to stop listening to them explain it, because they don't know what they're talking about. And you're getting the wrong information. You're getting a lot of misinformation, and you're getting a lot of takes on things that are coming from a place with no experience at all. And so that's one of the reasons why that I wanted to take time and speak with you. One thing I would talk about today before we go and stuff is, that the issue of trans in sports was a hot topic this last year, especially the selection cycle. Still is. Yeah. And there's a lot of people on both sides of the aisle with a lot of different opinions on that. And if I'm being honest with you, I don't really know how to feel about it, really, because I don't know. I don't follow sports. First of all, I don't honestly care about sports. I'm not trying to downplay it, but it's just not my thing. Yeah. So no, that's okay. So I mean, it's not, but what's your thoughts on it? Because I've always thought about it from the angle of I think it's a case by case basis. I think the school should decide. I don't think the government should be involved in it. I just think it's something that the school should look at as on an individual basis. But what is your takeaway on that?
Well, you have the right idea. The government should not be stepping in and regulating anything that we do. A lot of people don't realize that it is a case-by-case basis. They don't realize how much hormone therapy completely changes your genetic makeup. Like, I'm not athletic either. I love sports, right? Mm-hmm. I'm an Oakland girl. Raiders, A's, even though they're not there anymore. But even me, who's someone who's not very athletic at all, like I'm 2 left feet. I'm very uncoordinated. But when I took hormone therapy, I noticed significantly, and I know this is an anecdotal situation, but it's pretty much like that for every trans person. My testosterone levels dropped significantly, and your bone mass density changes too. In most sports too, like NCAA, now they caved to Donald Trump now. The 10 trans athletes can't play anymore in the NCAA. It's ridiculous. But it's basically a non-issue once you've gone through at least like a year of hormone therapy. And but they don't really care. The Riley Gaines of the world, who lost 5th place to 4 women, including Leah Thomas. They don't have to say that. They don't have to talk about how ridiculous it is that a person who came in 5th place is making a career off of complaining about trans women in sports, because it all goes back to this preconceived framework that they've made about trans women. They think that because at one point we identified as men, that we're always going to be like these really strong, athletic, masculine types. And it's not true at all. And furthermore, what's even worse about it is it was used as a wedge issue. Back in 2016, if you remember, not that long ago, when they tried to pass the bathroom ban in North Carolina, everybody, besides the right wing, got up in arms. And the NBA actually said, if you're going to pass that law, we're not going to have the All-Star game there. There was a point where trans people were actually way more respected. And because of all the propaganda we've seen the past 8 years, that is starting to go by the wayside. It was a wedge issue. They found that the bathroom bill didn't work. And so they were doing a lot of I can't remember what the right-wing think tank was, but they were doing a lot of surveys like, which issue of trans people upsets you the most? Which gets you most outraged? And they found out it was trans women in women's sports. And they framed it as fairness and all this garbage. And then that opened the door for people to start going backwards and start being more transphobic. And then they brought in kids, because it's always, whenever they want to pass something that's bigoted and fascistic, they have to think of the children. Oh my God, And now there's this whole, intense narrative around trans kids, or kids aren't trans, they're being groomed or whatever. And it all comes from that fascistic mindset. But most people, again, goes back to, they don't know that much about us. And so if they hear what they perceive to be authority figure telling them, oh yeah, no, that's a quote unquote biological male in women's sports, and they're blowing out all these records. It's not happening.
No,
we're not blowing out all these records. It's not real.
Yeah. And it's so crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's again, when they frame it in that preconceived notion, then it's easier for them to set their own reality. They can live inside their own reality. They don't ever have to question anything.
That's a great point. And they make it out as though it's just really crazy, the lengths they go to make it out almost like big George Foreman's in the boxing ring, with some little girl. It's crazy the way that they go about painting the picture. I'm really not trying to make light of it, but it's just they go over the top trying to make it. But I do remember, and I have saw it slowly become more of a hot topic issue. I do remember a time when it, like you said, a lot of people weren't talking about it as much. And I tell people this story and they have a hard time believing it, but I've got a few witnesses from the town I grew up in that saw this. But back in the 80s, we had a person in town, and I never did know their story. I don't know exactly what their story was, but the guy had a beard, and he always wore a dress to town and would go in the women's bathroom. And in the 1980s in Southeast Kentucky, the only thing anyone ever said was like, well, let's just wait till they come out before we go in. It's like no one had a problem with it. Like no one even cared. It was just like people would see them and go, and I never knew the story. I heard people like make their assumptions. Some people thought it was an undercover cop or whatever. We never really knew, but it was one of those things that like I don't remember seeing anyone get upset about it in the hometown I grew up in, and it's blood red. But back then it happened, and I saw it happening, and there wasn't people up in arms. But over time, it's got turned into this issue, and it has to be, I'm sure it has to be frustrating to always be painted as a predator. It's like, that's just one of the most ridiculous things. And I get called that just defending you. So I can't imagine what it would be like again to be in your shoes in that situation.
It's like I said, it's exhausting, and I am lucky enough. I'm white. I'm straight. And so I always tell people the only reason why I am marginalized is because I'm trans.
Mhm.
And so I feel like a huge obligation to speak out. I don't, I tell people I don't speak for all of us, but I do really believe, I heard this quote actually today from Harvey Milk, and I loved it. He was basically telling them, like, at the height of the homophobia, and Anita Bryant was going around trying to, encourage all different kinds of Republicans to pass laws taking away rights from gay people, just like they're doing right now.
Mhm.
Harvey Milk came out and said it's going to be hard, but you have to come out to your family. You have to come out to your friends. You have to be able to show us as human. And that's why I feel so obligated, because I see just a constant 24/7 unhinged assault. Like I said
Mhm.
earlier, from right wing media, Republicans, and a good chunk of Christians, not a lot, but the ones that have a lot of power and money, they want people to fear us. Why? Because a whole multitude of different reasons. This current, junction of the intersection of the right wing that we have today, like the Trump administration, they're basically bought off by two different factions of the right wing. You have the technocrats with Elon Musk and the PayPal mafia. Those freaks just want to have a corporate fiefdom of different tech CEOs and oligarchs. And then you've got the Christian nationalists who are doing Project 2025, right? The Russell Votes and all those people, right? And both of them use trans people as a wedge issue to distract people from the fact that they're trying to make life worse for them, take away their rights, take away more opportunity for them to have a better life. Billionaires trying to take so much more money off of the backs of our labor. And when you've got this horrific mix of fascism and Christian nationalism, well, who's going to go first? Because most normal people don't like a theocracy, no matter what religion it is. They don't like a religious dictatorship. And so they take their fascistic religious dictatorship message and they wrap it up in patriotism and the Bible and the flag. And so, what's easier than getting the most marginalized groups of people and turn against them? Because people don't know much about us. And so, if all they ever do is live in their little silos of right-wing conservative propaganda, well, then of course it's going to be really easy to see me and say, oh, predator. And so that's
Mhm.
why I'm a big fan of going around and talking to anybody who wants to listen.
Yeah, and it's funny because I can't count the stories here on the channel that I've shared about predators, and they were the ministers, and they were the Southern youth
Mm-hmm.
ministers, and the Republican in Minnesota who came out with the bill. I think his name was Justin Eichhorn or something like that. He came out with a bill that said Trump derangement syndrome would be recognized as a mental illness, and then like a couple of days later gets arrested, like that show. Chris Hansen. It was like
Yeah.
that was basically what happened. Yeah, he basically goes out there and was trying to hook up, was talking to detectives trying to hook up with a 16-year-old girl. And that's the guy that says that if we disagree with Trump, we're deranged. So, but they are, I think, they definitely are in their own echo chamber. And I just got so tired of hearing people say that this is what trans people are about, or this is what they say, that's why I wanted to bring you on and hand you the mic and say, you say it. Because I'm just tired of hearing, dudes around me sit and tell me what you think about something, and when they've never once took time out of their day to listen. So hopefully someone will,
I hope so too. You saw my interview. I'm super proud of it. There was this Christian band called Five Iron Frenzy, and they had a huge impact on me because of my Christian upbringing. And that was where I was really able to first start doing this. The saxophone player, her name's Leonore. She's an incredible, person who practices what Jesus preaches. And, it was amazing to be able to get that experience of have a person that was like an idol of mine as a child to be like, hey, no, I'm actually going to practice what I preach. And she gave me a platform to be able to have this really deep and hard, necessary conversation. And again, I want to thank you too. Like this is the kind of stuff we really, really need to do. Like a lot of people say, like, oh, we need to reach across the aisle. Well, like you're actually doing it. And once we're able to really start, because I really do believe in the good of humanity. Like I really do believe that most people are not these crazy bigots who think the worst things of us. And the more people are able to see us as human, the more people are going to be able to say, oh, okay, it was a little weird at first. I didn't get it. But you know what? This bitch likes football. I go to Taco Bell all the time. I love Taco Bell, right? Metallica's my favorite band. Like there's so many things about me that are just like everybody else. And people are going to be more willing to, let us live if they know that we're just like them. Like I'm struggling to find a job right now. How many people are trying to find a job right now? You have to be able to let yourself like not be afraid of things that you don't understand. You have to push yourself outside of your comfort zone as well. And until that happens, we're still going to be dealing with this garbage. But I really do believe more people than not are eventually going to come around.
Yeah, I can see that too, and I think more would come around. I think it would be a completely different world out there today if all these people that took all the time to push their propaganda and their bullshit. I mean, imagine if all these bro podcasters were open-minded, and had trans people. I'm just saying, if they were, it would be a completely different world. Unfortunately, we just live in this world where so many people, that I feel like they run to those places to hear their preconceived notion just kind of get echoed back at them. They want to feel validated by whatever it is they're feeling. And like I said, I'm just always telling people to learn about other people and what they're going through. Because when we, like you said, we all have our struggles and the things we go through, and we all have our favorite bands, and we all have our pet peeves, and it's like we've all got it all. So if we could ever just get past all the politics, and I really hate that. I really hate that issues like this have even became political, because to me, in my mind, they shouldn't have ever been. And so I just hope that as time goes on, more people can be inspired to drop their guard and just have an open mind. And I just really appreciate you taking time out of your day to sit and talk with me about it. And I hope this conversation reaches people. And I did watch the interview that you did, and I was really moved by it. I was like, I may have asked some of the same questions, but I know I got a different audience, and I just wanted to get it out there because I think it's just a great story.
Well, I honestly really can't thank you enough, because the fact, I was super excited to talk to you because you have a similar audience to the person, the woman that I interviewed from the band. And those are the kinds of people I want to reach the most. I always tell people when you're looking at, no matter what group you're talking to, there's always going to be three types of people, right? You've got your bigots, your assholes. I don't even, sometimes I'll mock them on Twitter or whatever just to have fun. But, I don't take them serious. I don't try to actually educate them because they don't want to. And then you've got allies. Love my allies. Sometimes they say things that are wrong, but I know that they're going to be able to take constructive criticism when I teach them. I refer to it as maintenance, right? You say something wrong. Oh, just say this instead. And then and I don't have to worry about those people. The ones that I focus on are the ones in the middle. They're uncomfortable. They may not know much about us, but if I can slowly, one by one, pick them off and bring them to our side, then eventually over time, I really do feel like we're going to be able to eventually get rid of this fascistic obsession that they have with trans people, because it's always going to be somebody different. It's our turn right now. We are the marginalized group that's being picked on severely. And if we don't step in and try and do something as well, it's not like we should have to, right? But I do feel like it's going to take a give and take from both sides, or else, like it's frightening. You talk to the average trans person right now and they tell you, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of us, rightfully so, we feel like, you don't like to say it out loud, but we feel like it's a genocide against us. Mm-hmm. It's hard when you have so much power and wealth and influence gunning for a group of people who barely, in Texas right now, they have a bill in the House that's going to make it a felony to be a trans person. If you put the gender that's opposite of what you were assigned at birth on your government documents, that's a felony. Not yet. Yeah. Hopefully not. But these red states are the, places where these fascists experiment against us. Mm-hmm. And so when you have that level of evil and devotion to just moral depravity against a group of people who can barely fight for themselves, it's scary as fuck. And part of the reason why I'm so passionate is I feel like I have to reach out to anybody that's willing to listen. And so, again, really appreciate what you did. I mean,
I appreciate you.
Conversation was fantastic.
I appreciate you. And what would you say to a trans person who was maybe afraid of coming out, or how do you approach them? And what would you say to someone who is wanting to, but may live in a place like Texas and they're scared to death?
You do it at your own pace, but never deny yourself your right to be free, to be the person you were meant to be. However that comes about, however long it takes to get there, all I ask is that you don't give up. Because, and I will say this every time, I know that I'm a white, straight trans woman who lives in one of the bluest counties of the bluest states in California. But having that experience of being able to be my true self, it washed away all of the fears that I ever had of the rejection. And you're not truly living unless you're truly being yourself. And sometimes, you can take it as an act of rebellion. And because a lot of conservatives, they love to talk about individual freedom and, not being oppressed by the government, but yet they want to support an ideology where the government is going to literally oppress you just because you are stepping outside of the norm and being a person that doesn't go by, whatever society is telling us to do. Like, we're going against the grain, being ourselves. Like, and there's freedom in that. There's a level of freedom that you just don't understand until you do it. And it just gives you it's almost like a spiritual level of peace. It's hard as fuck. Don't get me wrong. It took me a long time to get to where I'm at. But 11 times out of 10, I would do it again. And so whatever you got to do to find that strength to be who you are, do it. You will be so glad that you did.
Well, I really appreciate that. I appreciate that. That's great. And I hope you have the best of days. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day. And I just want you to know you're welcome to come back here on the channel and we'll talk anytime. You got something going on, just holler at me and we'll get back on here and do it again.
Well, thank you so much. I'm definitely going to be back on.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I'm a big, as you can tell, I'm a talker, and there's a lot of stuff, not just us, but just, democracy in general. So
absolutely. We'll come back anytime, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much.